do you want more?
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
Yeah, Danny the singer, he'd seen the video, or he'd seen a video by the same guy for something. I'm not quite sure what it was. And he said he got very excited. So I've seen this guy. He does his animated videos, and they're kind of really, really sort of wacky. And so we just said, great, you know, hey, if it's different, then let's give it a go. And I think particularly as it's quite an aggressive kind of rock track, and to have a kind of almost like childlike little man of felt running a little bike. It's kind of, there's something cool about that. It's just like not what you'd expect. It's not the usual macho in your face rock stuff. So that kind of appealed to our sense of humor, I guess.
Right. It is different. And, you know, I guess a refreshing in a sense, you know, it's not the typical band performance type of thing that you typically see in that kind of a thing. And you also just released a new one for Across the Nation. And that one, tell me about that, because as a whole, just in listening to the song, it seems like it definitely has a post-pandemic type of vibe to it, a message. I don't know if that's accurate, because I've heard that song only a handful of times over the last week.
Yeah, well, now you got it in one there, Ruben. You're exactly right. I mean, there's quite a few. It's a theme that runs throughout the album, really, obviously, because a lot of it was conceived, written, and even recorded, some of it in various states of pandemic and lockdown. So, and being the kind of people we are, and being the sort of songwriter I am, I have to write about stuff that's going on around me. And so obviously the pandemic is something that affected everybody. Some people, you know, it wasn't too bad for me, but lots of people had it very, very tough. But I guess what this song's about is it's very specifically about being a musician and not being able to play, and the frustration of that. And so you get this kind of build up of tension, and hopefully the song is kind of the release of that. And, you know, maybe it's like the lyrics refer to that, you know, waves of joy and that kind of thing. And I think, you know, we have this tour coming up next month in the UK, and hopefully the song will prove to be true. I don't know, but yeah, I think it's just something that everybody that goes, you know, rock music and going to gigs is part of their life. I think it's something that everybody felt, I guess.
Right. And as far as the new album, Dopamine, first of all, I mean, that's a chemical in the brain that produces you know, elation, let's say. What inspired the title? Is it something about just getting past this pandemic, post-pandemic, and getting back on stage and
well, some of it was that, but some of it was also just about kind of me really observing what's going on in the world, and how people, you know, there's a whole generation now of young people who live through this small device in their hand, and it's their kind of doctor, it's their advisor, it's their kind of source of appreciation, it's, you know, validation, and it's all of these things. So, you know, for a songwriter, that's kind of like manna from heaven. There's so many aspects of that are interesting. Yeah, it was actually, I read an article in an English newspaper. It was an American psychologist, and she was saying that it's this whole generation now, people who become dopamine addicts. You know, they need to get their kind of amount of likes or appreciation on their phone, and it's kind of sort of taking over their life. And I found that as an interesting kind of concept. So we sort of looked at that, and also like as you said in the question, that the thing that kind of the social interaction and all those things that we couldn't do, that were taken away from us when we were locked down, and that natural release of dopamine was gone. So yeah, it's kind of it's obviously it's something that's affecting all of our lives to greater or lesser extent. So I found that fascinating, and like I said, there's lots and lots of opportunities and subject matter within that to write about. You know?
Right. And I don't know if you would consider this a concept record, but there is somewhat of, like you said, a theme, you know, throughout the record. Is that also what resulted in the record being a double record? I mean, you just guys kept on writing, and all the songs kind of fit within that confines of the somewhat loose concept.
Yeah, I think loosely, yeah. I think, I mean, the last album to the previous album also, because a lot of that was about the the changes going on in Europe and Brexit and stuff. And this one, I think, is mainly focused on a bit more inward looking, as you know, COVID has made us a bit more inward because we've had to be to survive. Yeah, so I mean, I think that there is, I guess, a loose concept, although we do try and examine it from both sides. I mean, songs like "Dancing in the Sunshine," which is very optimistic. It's about having a party, getting all your friends around for a beer, which is not an incredibly original subject, but in the midst of pandemic, that was like, if you could do anything in the world, what would it be? It'd be like, I'd love to get all my buddies around and have a party. And so it sort of examines that. Yeah, I mean, hey, it's the 16 songs thing that we recorded 20. The plus side of the pandemic for me, as the guy who writes the band songs, is that it allowed me lots and lots of time to write. So I did. And then we ended up recording 20. Probably with thinking we were going to whittle it down to the usual kind of 11 or 12. But then when we were at the point where the songs were being mixed, we all kind of came to the same conclusion, which we all felt that there was 16 of them that needed to be heard. And so that kind of precipitated the fact it was a double album. And it was like, okay, right. And we went to our label and said, listen, the new album's finished. And they went, great. And we said, but it's a double album. And they were like, oh, okay, why? And we just said, we have a lot of material. And it's good. So we sent them the album and they said, okay, we get it now. So yeah, everything was cool.
And Thunder has been one of those bands, having followed you guys from the beginning of, at least when I heard you guys back on Backstreet, when you guys reissued the record, because you had 2 shots at that one. But it seems like over the past 20 years or so, I think you guys have been giving the fans more bang for their buck with all the bonus goodies that you have. I mean, even with All the Right Noises, stellar record, still fresh to me. It was just out a little over a year ago, in fact, and here you are with the Dopamine coming out. But having said that, even with that record, you reissued it, and in a deluxe form, added extra stuff, and that live performance. So I mean, you guys are always doing a little extra for the fans, whether it's bonus content or even signed pre-orders and stuff like that. So I mean, how important is that for you guys to do things like that?
Well, we've always, I mean, since the band's inception, really, we've always kind of been interested in listening and talking to our fans, because I think it's very important. They're the people who put the food on your table, and I think it's important to have a handle on how they see us and what they think is good and what they think is bad. And we've always kind of been interactive in that sense. I mean, we were doing kind of meet and greets before there was a concept of meet and greets, really, just because you would get out the front after a show in our early days and talk to people. And we're still doing it now, albeit slightly differently these days. But that concept runs through everything we've done. And I think that the most important thing about what we do is obviously the music. And so I think if you can, if you have lucky enough to have, as we do, a large and dedicated fan base that have been with us many years, we want to look after them. We want them to be happy. So, if we have, something that is unreleased or that might be interesting for them, we'll let them have it, because why not? It's better that than it's sitting there doing nothing. So, I think it's important, that for bands to be, aware, respectful, and appreciative of their fans, because at the end of the day, without the fans, you ain't going nowhere.
Right. And one of the things, and you alluded to this earlier about the people, technology, more or less. But one of the things where bands have really taken a hit, in the age of streaming and downloading and all of that. And then obviously the last 2.5 years or so with this pandemic. I mean, how much of a blow does this take to a artist, because then you guys have to fire things back up and go, gee, we need to make money, right? I mean, obviously you guys, that's your craft, and that's how you guys bring in the money. How difficult is it to fire things back up, after, you did release that record, but obviously, the performance thing where you guys make the money and ticket sales and merch and stuff like that isn't really happening. Tell us a little bit about that from the perspective of an artist and stuff.
Well, I think for us, we're fairly fortunate in that we could still, we still had a conversation with our fans, and we were still able to find things to do to keep them engaged, even though it was very, very difficult, obviously, because you couldn't actually do a show. But we just sort of tried as best we could to kind of get through it. I think for us, it wasn't so bad, but I think for young acts coming through who maybe don't generate the kind of money that we generate when we do work, I think it's very, very difficult because, there's so many things working against you, and for British acts, I mean, God, we have, as well as the pandemic and the cost of living and everything else, there's Brexit on top of that, which has really not been helpful either. So it's been tough. Like I said, we're fortunate enough to have been able to weather the storm with a degree of comfort. So for us, it's not really been an issue, apart from being frustrating. Mm-hmm. It's not been a financial threat to Thunder as a business entity, if you like. So that's been okay. But I suppose the wider point of what you're saying is that, with the digital platforms becoming more and more important, and more the way that people consume music, obviously the remuneration that musicians receive via the digital platforms is I'm surprised it's legal, to be fair. It's so unfair. Mm-hmm. There are steps afoot, particularly in this country. I'm not sure how it is in the States, but over here the PRS are trying to do something about this, but it's going to be a long, hard road. As soon as music went into the digital domain, it became like the Wild West again. People were just staking their claims to stuff that wasn't theirs, and that's kind of what happened with Spotify. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Spotify is a fantastic tool. I mean, what a brilliant sort of thing to have on your phone where you can just reference a piece of music. I use it as my library, but there's two faults with Spotify. One is it's too cheap. Back in the day when people used to buy CDs, you'd go in and you'd spend, $12 or whatever it was on a CD. And it was one thing by one artist. Now, for the same price, 20 years later, you can have everything by everybody. That cannot be right. So the inherent value in music has been questioned by that. And the other thing as well about it is that I think that it separates music from to me, what's sometimes equally important is the visual aspect of things. I mean, I grew up in an era where, people like Storm Thorgerson were making album covers and it's like, can you imagine sort of listening to Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd without the artwork? I mean, it just doesn't, right? And I think that's obviously Spotify, people's listening habits are different. They'll listen to a track, they'll move on. So there's no kind of great sense of concept around the music anymore. It's like it's become much more of a kind of disposable thing. And that for me is the problem, because some music is disposable and should be, like food is, Right. You have McDonald's, you have haute cuisine, and it's the same thing with music. Some of it merits kind of more attention than others, but I think where music is very, very good and has inequality, I think it should be acknowledged properly. And I question whether Spotify can do that.
Right. And there's something about like you said earlier about the current norm is that, like you said, technology, people aren't about physical. A lot of people aren't. I mean, I think there is a surge with vinyl and hopefully now with CD, it sounds like. Yeah. But, I remember even saving some of your lunch money so you could buy, a CD like Backstreet Symphony, right?
Yeah,
and that's not something that kids do these days. So, yeah. So in promotion for this, it sounds like you guys are going to do a tour. Any concerns about shaking off any of the rust from this downtime that you had during the pandemic and stuff?
Well, it's funny you should say that. I mean, obviously we're not getting any younger, so it's not like, so yeah, I'm mindful of that, as I think we all are. And, I've been out cycling and walking and stuff. And nice. I tried to keep myself pretty fit all the way through the pandemic thing anyway, but, yeah. I mean, there may be an element of that. It may take a couple of shows just to kind of, creak back into action. But hey, I don't care. I mean, I'm just glad that we're there, and I'm hoping that people at those first couple of shows, if we're not quite at an our A game that they'll be so happy to see us they won't notice. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
And so as far as, again, just the typical thing with a band that's been around as long as Thunder, I mean, obviously the set list is a thing where you have to keep everybody happy and also keep yourselves happy, but you also have to insert the new stuff. So about how many tunes do you plan on inserting into the current set list?
I have to be honest with you, Ruben, it's been keeping me awake at night, that question, because, obviously we've not toured properly for like 4 years. So right. There's going to be lots of people coming, all expecting different things. Obviously, we have not one, but 2 new albums to sell, or 3 if you include this one as a double album. Right?
That's true. Yeah.
We have that. And also people who haven't seen us for, 4 or 5 years, maybe wanting to hear songs that they're more familiar with. So it is a fine act of balancing. And I think, when I was a kid, in the 70s, I used to go and watch lots of bands. And I remember going to see a couple of bands where they just played all of their new album and nothing else. And I kind of found it a bit self-indulgent. And I think that people work hard for their money, and, if they choose to come and see your band when there's so much competition out there, that's a wonderful thing. So I think they are entitled to hear some of the tunes that maybe the reason they're coming to see you in the first place, which may be 20, 30 years old. Mm-hmm. So I'm aware of that. And I think, like I said, it's an act of balance, and getting enough of the new stuff in there so people know you're still making new music, right. And balancing that against people's kind of nostalgic desire to hear older stuff. So it's getting that right, and then making it all balanced musically as well. They're the questions. I'm nearly there with their set for May. A couple more things to tweak, and a couple of things I won't know until we get in the rehearsal room. So I'm pretty much there with it.
Right. Does it ever get old to perform a tune like Backstreet Symphony? I mean, that's always a fun one, no matter how often I listen to it.
Well, what we tend to do is we don't rehearse songs that we've been playing 30 years. We just don't rehearse them. We do them at shows, because when you have an audience there, it's obviously the adrenaline's pumping. It's a very different thing. When it's just us in a rehearsal room, we don't need to rehearse those songs. They're so ingrained in us, right, that it would be a kind of futile rehearsing them, because you know them so well that you don't really concentrate when you play them. So your mind wanders. It's like so it's much better to work on the new stuff in rehearsal and leave the older stuff for an audience to give you the impetus you need to deliver them properly.
Right. One thing about Thunder that I've always said is that you guys seem to have like you guys kind of fall into like the sophisticated rock, somewhere around Bad Company with a little Zeppelin kind of spin to it, and other influences from British rock and stuff. But for yourselves, I mean, how much of an influence would a band like Van Halen been for you guys? Because again, relatable to United States. Right. Yep. I mean, a lot of those bands that are your contemporaries from North America would definitely list them as, up here on the list. But for somebody like Thunder, I'm kind of curious where they would slot in, if they even slotted in. Right.
Well, I mean, if I think about the 70s and the music I was just in the early 70s, when I was in my early teens, it was mainly British rock and roll, Zeppelin, Stones, The Who. And then a friend of mine had an older sister at uni, and she would bring home Doobie Brothers, Steely Dan, this kind of stuff, and he would bring it into school, and we would all swap albums. And this was my first kind of inroads into all that fantastic American rock music from the 70s, and that was a massive influence on me, massive. And if you listen to a couple of songs on this album, Dancing in the Sunshine, it's definitely tips its hat to the Doobie Brothers and Steve Miller, I think. And Big Pink Supermoon, there's a touch of Tom Petty in there. And so it's American music has always been a massive part of me. And I think for all of us as a band, and the influence of American music is incalculable. But Van Halen is, I'm glad you mentioned it, because in 78, could have been 79, first time they came here, they opened for Black Sabbath.
Oh yeah, right.
And kind of nobody had heard of them. It was I talk about mind blown. I mean,
right.
And they they came on. It's like, oh, who's supporting? They, oh, maybe we'll leave the bar and go check out the support act. Right? Best decision I ever made. And when they opened with Eruption, and it was like, and Eddie stood with his back to the audience, so nobody could see how he was doing it. It was like, turn around.
Right.
And he can't be doing that. Can't be one guitar. Wow. And he did. And then you saw the kind of finger tapping and all that thing. And they were fantastic. They were so entertaining. Daily Roth was funny. The presentation of the show, they were having the best time in the world. And obviously, poor old Sabbath could not follow them at all. It was like a massacre. It really was. Great as Sabbath are, but as a live act, oh my God. No, Van Halen were magnificent. And I saw them every time they came over. And then we found ourselves in 95 on the same bill as them. A few stadium gigs in the UK. It was Bon Jovi, Van Halen, Thunder.
Wow.
I saw a couple of other bands, Ugly Kid Joe maybe as well, a few other bands. But obviously by that time in the UK, Thunder were quite a big act. And it was interesting because when we got told the bill, the promoter was saying, well, we're not sure, we're Van Halen, Thunder sold a lot of records. And we all went, no, we don't want to come on after them, please. No, don't make us do that. And so we got to play in the same bill with them, and it was fantastic. And I very fortunately got to stand, about 20 feet away from Eddie.
Oh, wow.
And stood with his roadie, and I watched him play for 2 days running, and just thought, even if I practiced guitar for every second I had left in my life, I wouldn't even come close. This is like watching McEnroe hit a tennis ball or Pele with a football. It's just a God-given, incredible talent.
Right.
And what was lovely was that after the second show we did with them, their tour manager came and banged on our dressing room door, said, hey, the guys would like to have a beer with you. We're like, wow, fantastic. So we trotted off down to their dressing room. We spent an hour with them, and it was great. And strangely enough, though, I shook Eddie's hand and said, thank you for fucking up my life as a guitar player for a whole year while I was trying to work out how you did it. I just gave up in the end. And he laughed. He said, yeah, you're not the first to say that. So we joked. And then we talked about golf.
Oh, nice.
Crazy.
Oh, cool.
And I said, what's your handicap? And he said, well, about 19. And I said, well, at least I'm better than you at one thing, I said. So that was cool. And it was a really weird scene in their dressing room because, like I said, Bon Jovi were top of the bill, and it was very much John's show. And I don't want to badmouth John, but he's maybe not the friendliest artist to talk with. But the Van Halen boys were great. And Sammy was lovely. The Van Halen brothers were great. Michael Anthony, they were all lovely, very welcoming. And Robert Downey Jr. was in their dressing room as well, which was kind of weird.
Oh, wow.
It was cool. A really nice guy. I'm really glad I got the chance to meet him. Before he passed. So just an amazing talent. They were a great rock and roll band, they kind of defined their own area of rock, and that's the biggest kind of compliment you can pay to anybody.
Right. As far as with Thunder, I mean, how important is it to have a presence in North America? Because I know that obviously it's not something where a band like Thunder can tour extensively, and if so, it's probably some scattered, major markets and stuff like that. Yeah. Or like, for example, you guys did the Monsters of Rock cruise a few years back.
Well, that's the closest we've been to the States for a lot of years. Mm-hmm. I think that the problem is, Ruben, is that we got off to a very good start with the first album, and I think we sold 250,000 copies of Backstreet Symphony in America without actually coming to America, which was kind of weird. Mm-hmm. And the video was all over MTV, and Dirty Love was all over the radio. And then overnight, grunge happened, and it kind of blew us out the water a little bit. And our label, which was Geffen, withdrew any tour support. So we were in a position where if we'd have come to the States and toured, we would have been sort of swimming against the tide in a big way. At radio, we would have, record company didn't want to support us, so it would have cost us money. And it would just seem too difficult. I regret that now. I think we should have taken it on the chin and come anyway. And we should have gone to the markets where we knew we were selling, the Midwest, West Coast, wherever, and gone there and played. And I regret that we didn't. But we didn't, and hey, you move on.
Right.
Since then, well, we've not been back. So, it's been, some of the albums haven't been released there. But thankfully, BMG now are getting the album out there. And, this is one of the good things about Spotify is we're picking up more people in America now who are kind of finding us via Spotify, via recommendation stuff. So that's all really good. So I've not given up hope, and we still, as a band, would love to come and play there. Even if it was in, as you say, kind of, key markets or whatever. We're still not given up. And I'd love to come. I did do one American tour, but it wasn't with Thunder. It was with Power Station.
Oh, right.
In the mid-90s. And I was fascinating. I loved it. I love the country. I try and come there every year at least once. And it's some fascinating, the extremes in America, just in the US, are incredible. Beautiful country, amazing cities, great people. So I love it. So for me, it feels like the kind of the itch that we've not scratched properly.
Right.
So hopefully we'll get the chance at some point.
Right. Now, I know you mentioned, some promotion for Backstreet, but there was no U.S. promotion, North American promotion for Laughing on Judgment Day then?
No, none. It was very peculiar how that all kind of worked out. Geffen Records, like I said, originally we were on Capitol. The guy who ran Capitol hated the band. They let us go. We signed to Geffen with the legendary John Kolodner, and the album went out, and it was looking great. It was looking great, and then grunge came along, and then I think Geffen was having despite the fact we were still contracted to them at that point, they were kind of imploding and changing because of the whole grunge thing. And I think they actually bought the Sub Pop label, I think. So there's lots of that going on. And ourselves, and, even to a lesser extent, Aerosmith, Whitesnake, all the rock acts they had in the kind of classic rock area kind of got a little bit put to one side. And Aerosmith went to Sony, didn't they? I think Kolodner went with them, in fact. But they were a big enough band in the US to ride that storm out. We unfortunately weren't. Laughing on Judgment Day just got lost in that whole process. And then Kolodner decided he was going to stay for a while. So the third album, Behind Closed Doors, we were very keen to get Geffen on side. So we actually came to the States to make the album. And we made some of it in Atlanta and most of it in LA. And we finished it in LA, mixed it in LA, so Kolodner could come to the studio, and he did. And he loved the album, but then they didn't release it. So it was an extremely frustrating time. But, that's rock and roll. You can only change the things that you can have the power to change. And we didn't. So, hey, you move on. And it's a shame and frustrating, but, I'm just about over it now.
Just a couple more things, and then I'll cut you loose. Thank you for your time. And
no worries.
Like I said, we'll get you a link for knac.com. As far as you did some work, I think, with Black Star Writers, right? Because you're pals with Ricky Warwick, and you appeared on his solo record and stuff like that. So tell me a little bit about that and how that came to be.
Okay, well, Scotty Gorham and Ricky, I've known Ricky, 35 years probably. Scott, I've known about 20 years. I play golf with Scott. So socially, we see quite a bit of each other. And obviously, Damon Johnson, their guitar player, couldn't do that tour for some reason. And I got a call saying, is there any chance you're free to do it? Because it came in a time when Thunder weren't doing anything particularly. So I said, yeah, I'd love to do it. And, to hang out with two good friends and, go down to South America for a couple of weeks, great. And it wasn't exactly a punishing schedule either. I think we had 6 shows in 12 days.
Oh, wow.
So, that's a lot of sitting by the pool drinking caipirinha. So that was fine with me. That was cool. Some of the gigs were with Judas Priest. Some of the gigs were with Alice in Chains, which was great. And it was very, very enjoyable. It was great to hang out with Ricky and Scott and, just shoot the breeze and talk and watch the world go by. It was basically like a paid holiday for me. It was fabulous. And at the end of it, Ricky said, I'm making a solo album. Would you play it? I said, yeah, sure. Just send me the track. Because obviously he lives in LA. And he sent me the track over. I played it, sent it back. And yeah, that was it. I saw him actually 2 weeks ago. He's been over here on tour.
Oh,
And I went
nice.
up to a show up in Nottingham, and yeah, we hung out and had a drink. It was great to see him. Yeah, he's a lovely guy, Ricky.
So last one, and then again, I'll cut you loose and thank you for your time. Who was the first musician that you looked up to that you met, and how did that inspire, your interaction with your fans?
Oh wow. I think probably I'd have to say Jimmy Page, who I didn't meet until we were quite successful since '92. I mean, he turned up at the Thunder show, and he came with our agent, who hadn't told us Jimmy was coming. And we left the stage at the end of the set before we went back on to do the encore. So we ran into the dressing room, to take a leak and drink a beer quickly before we went back out. And Jimmy was in our dressing room, which was kind of weird. So I've not met him before. And it's like, oh, right. And of course, we're all full of adrenaline because he's just come off the stage. He's like, hi, can I get a beer? I said, you can have anything you want, anything. And he was very cool. And after the show, we sort of hung out, and we were in a hotel across the street, and he came over with us. And I sat chatting with him till about 4 a.m. And that was great. And he was a complete gentleman in the very kind of traditional English sense of the word. He didn't swear. He was very respectful. Just a really, really nice man. And he was very inquisitive. That's what I really liked about him. He wasn't just like, I am the great Jimmy Page. He wasn't holding court. He was asking. I mean, the first question he asked me was like, how do you get your guitar sound? And I said, this is Jimmy Page asking me how I get my guitar sound. Right. I said, well, I just plug in, really. I don't really think about it. He said, yeah. Good guitar, good amp, right? And I went, yeah, that's really it. And but he's lovely. And I've met a few over the years. Not many. Most of the people I've met that I liked as a kid. I've played with a few people. We got involved in a kids' charity here about 15 years ago, and I found myself being a musical director of this one gig that we put on, and played with Ian Pace and John Lord and Roger Daltrey. Massive heroes of mine, and they were all really, really nice. Not a bad word to say about any of them. But I think Jimmy was the first one that I got the chance to really sort of sit down with and socialize with on more than one occasion. And a really nice man.
Nice. Fantastic. Hey, Luke, thank you for your time. Best with the record. We'll plug the hell out of it, and hope to talk to you again somewhere down the road. All right.
It's great talking to you. And, I remember very fond memories of listening to KNAC when I was in LA. So yeah, it's great.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, my friend.
Take care.
You take care now.
Yep.
Bye-bye.